The old man's warning still echoed in Samuel's mind as he crossed the threshold of the ancient woodland. The trees will call your name. But that's not the part that should scare you. It's when they start telling you things you've forgotten, things you wish had stayed buried, that you should turn back. Samuel didn't believe in ghost stories, nor did he fear the eerie myths that surrounded Blackthorn Woods. He was a historian, a man of facts and logic. The local legends had drawn him here, yes, but only because he intended to prove them wrong. With a small recorder in his coat pocket and a notebook in hand, he followed the worn footpath, his boots crunching against the damp earth. The trees loomed tall, their gnarled branches twisted together like skeletal fingers clasping in secrecy. A deep, solemn hush cloaked the forest, as if it were listening. At first, all was normal, the rustling of leaves, the occasional snap of a twig beneath his step. But then he heard it. A whisper. Faint. Just a breath of sound slipping between the trees. Samuel stopped, pulse quickening. He turned his head, scanning the forest. There was no one. Only the wind, or so he told himself. But then, another whisper, clearer this time. Samuel. The voice curled around him like a creeping vine, seeping into his bones. A trick of the wind, he thought. Just the rustling of leaves forming something that sounded like his name. He pressed on. The further he walked, the louder the whispers became. They weren't just calling his name anymore. They were speaking in hushed, fractured phrases. Do you remember? It's still there. Buried. Hidden. Samuel halted. His breath came unevenly now. The words felt personal, almost as if the forest knew him. But that was impossible. Then, from the corner of his eye, something moved. A shadow flitting between the trees, too fast to be human, too solid to be a trick of the light. His grip on his notebook tightened. Hello. His voice sounded small, swallowed by the dense silence that followed. No answer. Taking a slow breath, he pulled out his recorder and pressed the button. Samuel Greaves, Field Notes. I've entered Blackthorn Woods at approximately 3:45 p.m. Strange auditory phenomena detected, whispers, potentially caused by wind patterns or distant travelers. No clear source yet. We'll investigate further. A branch cracked behind him. He spun, heart hammering. Nothing. Yet the trees felt closer now, their bark dark and glistening like wet stone. He reached out, running his fingers along the surface of one. The moment he touched it, the whispering stopped. A deep, suffocating silence fell over the forest. Not even the wind dared move. Then, beneath his fingertips, something rough, carved words in the bark. He traced them with his fingers, trying to make sense of the letters. The inscription was old, weathered, but he could just make it out. Samuel Greaves. 1994. His own name. And the year of his birth. His breath hitched. His pulse pounded in his ears. The whispers returned, but this time they weren't just voices. They were memories, fragments of a past he had long forgotten. A child's laughter. The sound of a shovel piercing earth. A woman's voice, trembling. You have to forget, Samuel. You can never tell them. Samuel stumbled back, his chest tightening with something beyond fear. The forest remembered him, and it was beginning to remind him why. Samuel's breath came in shallow gasps as he stared at the name carved into the tree. Samuel Greaves. 1994. The forest couldn't have known his name. It was impossible. The logical part of his mind struggled for an explanation. Perhaps someone with the same name had been here before. A coincidence. But deep down, he knew better. The trees had spoken to him. They had whispered secrets that curled at the edge of his memory, just out of reach. His fingers trembled as he reached for his recorder, pressing the button with a shaky thumb. Field Notes. I've discovered something unusual. My name, carved into the bark of a tree. The carving looks aged, as though it's been here for decades. There's no rational explanation for this. Not yet. Continuing exploration. The moment he clicked the recorder off, a gust of wind rushed through the trees, whipping his coat around his legs. It carried the scent of damp earth and something else, something old, like decayed wood and stagnant water. And then, The whispers returned. He came back. He doesn't remember. But we do. Samuel's stomach twisted. The voices weren't scattered now, they were close. Circling. The sensation of being watched prickled at his skin. He turned sharply, scanning the trees. The thick canopy allowed only slivers of pale light to filter through, casting shifting shadows across the undergrowth. The feeling of wrongness settled deep in his bones. Then, a glint of something metal caught his eye. About 10 feet away, half buried in a bed of dead leaves, something protruded from the ground. A flash of rusted silver. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward. The closer he got, the heavier the air felt, pressing against him like unseen hands. His boots crunched over fallen twigs as he crouched and brushed away the leaves. It was an old, rusted shovel. Dirt still clung to its blade. The handle was cracked, splintered by time. Samuel swallowed hard. A shovel, left abandoned in a place like this, it wasn't just discarded. It had been used. A memory tugged at the edges of his mind. The sound of something heavy hitting the earth. A child's hands grasping at cold dirt. You have to forget, Samuel. You can never tell them. His own pulse roared in his ears. The voice, it had been his mother's. But why? A sharp snap of a twig behind him. He turned too quickly, lost his balance, and stumbled backward. His hands hit the ground, fingers sinking into the damp soil. But he wasn't alone. Standing among the trees, half concealed in shadow, was a figure. Not moving. Not speaking. Just watching. Samuel's throat tightened. His instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs wouldn't move. The figure was tall, its form obscured by the heavy darkness between the trees. And yet, there was something familiar about it. Who's there? His voice came out hoarse. The figure didn't answer. But the whispers did. He doesn't remember, but he will. Then, without a sound, the figure stepped back into the trees and vanished. Samuel was on his feet in an instant, stumbling toward where it had been. But when he reached the spot, there was nothing, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Just the whispers, swirling around him like a forgotten song. And the rusted shovel at his feet, waiting for him to remember what he had buried. The shovel sat at Samuel's feet like an accusation. A rusted thing, eaten by time, yet it felt alive in his presence, waiting. The whispers in the trees had stilled, but the silence was worse. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was the presence of something unseen, listening. Samuel knelt, brushing his fingers over the handle. The wood was worn smooth, not by years of weathering, but by use. Someone had gripped this handle tightly, again and again, forcing the blade into the earth. His stomach churned. Why does this feel familiar? His mother's voice echoed again in his mind, a fragment of something lost. You have to forget, Samuel. You can never tell them. Tell them what? The whispers slithered back, softer this time. Dig. Samuel stiffened. The word wasn't spoken aloud, it was breathed into his mind, curling around his thoughts like ivy. He looked down at the ground beneath him. The dirt was disturbed, uneven, as though something had been buried long ago. His pulse pounded. This was absurd. He was chasing shadows, falling into the trap of folklore. Yet his hands moved on their own, fingers wrapping around the shovel's handle. It felt right in his grip. Like muscle memory. With a deep breath, he lifted it and thrust the blade into the earth. The moment it hit the soil, the forest sighed. A slow, rustling exhale, like the trees had been waiting for this. Samuel dug. The first few shovelfuls of dirt were light, easy. The deeper he went, the heavier the soil became, clinging to the blade as if trying to resist. His breaths grew labored. Sweat trickled down his neck despite the cool air. And then, thunk. The blade hit something solid. Samuel froze. He dropped to his knees, frantically scraping away the dirt with his hands, fingers caked in damp earth. Wood. An old, rotting plank. Not part of a fallen tree, not debris, a box. His chest tightened as he pried at the edges, forcing his trembling fingers beneath the warped lid. It resisted for only a moment before breaking free with a sickening crack. The stench hit him first. A foul, decayed odor, damp and heavy. Then he saw what lay inside. A bundle of cloth. Stained dark, nearly black with age. Something wrapped within it. Samuel's breath came in quick, ragged gasps. His hands hovered over the bundle, shaking. He knew, deep down, in the marrow of his bones, he knew, he had seen this before. And then, before he could stop himself, he pulled the cloth aside. Beneath it was a skull. Small. Human. Samuel reeled back, his stomach heaving. His vision blurred as memories crashed into him, half-formed images, pieces of a puzzle that had been ripped from his mind. A boy, no older than 7, standing in this very forest. The weight of the shovel in his tiny hands. His mother's frantic whispers. A shallow grave. A promise. You must forget, Samuel. You must never tell. He staggered to his feet, the world tilting. The trees loomed over him, their bark scarred with names, hundreds of names, carved deep. The whispers surged. He remembers. He knows. Now he must choose. And from the darkness between the trees, the figure returned. Closer now. Watching. Waiting. Samuel's breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled back from the shallow grave. The air was thick, pressing in on him, and the trees felt closer, like a silent jury waiting for a verdict. The skull in the box stared up at him, empty sockets hollow and accusing. The whispers were rising again, a tide of voices that spoke in fragments. He knows. He must not run. The forest remembers. And then, beyond the tangled trees, it moved. The figure. No longer distant, no longer a fleeting shadow. It was there, standing at the edge of the clearing. Closer than before. Samuel's pulse roared in his ears. His mind screamed at him to run, but his body remained frozen. The figure was tall, impossibly still, its form half-shrouded in darkness. But something about it was wrong. It wasn't just a person watching him. It was something else. Then it spoke. Not in a whisper like the trees. Not in a broken, scattered voice. But in a deep, hollow murmur that rattled through the clearing like dry leaves. You dug it up. Samuel's breath hitched. The voice was familiar, yet distant, like a memory that refused to surface. What is this? He managed to croak, his voice barely his own. The figure took a step forward. The ground beneath Samuel's feet trembled. The trees groaned, their bark twisting as if in pain. You don't remember, but the forest does. Samuel's grip tightened around the rusted shovel, his only lifeline in this waking nightmare. His mind fought against the flood of memories clawing their way up from the dark corners of his past. The whispers were getting louder now, rising in a storm around him. You were here before. You dug the first grave. You promised to forget. Samuel's knees buckled. His fingers dug into his scalp as flashes of something long buried erupted in his mind. A child's laughter, his own. A second child, smaller, weaker. A fight. The sound of something heavy hitting the ground. The panic in his mother's eyes. We have to hide it, Samuel. No one can ever know. The earth had swallowed his secret. His mother had made sure of that. And then she had made him forget. Samuel let out a strangled gasp. His own voice. His own hands. The grave before him was his doing. The figure stepped closer. For the first time, Samuel could make out its face, his face. A twisted, distorted version of himself, hollow-eyed and spectral, its skin pale as if drained of all life. It stared back at him with an expression not of malice, but of sorrow. You buried me, Samuel. Samuel staggered back, shaking his head violently. No. No, I was just a boy. I wouldn't. The whispers turned to laughter. The trees rustled with a sound like cruel amusement. But you did. Samuel's doppelganger extended a hand, its fingers impossibly long, curling like roots reaching for him. And now, the forest has brought you back, to finish what you started. Darkness swelled around him. The clearing shrank. The trees closed in. The shovel in his hand felt heavier than before, weighted with a choice. The past had returned. The forest had remembered. And now, it demanded payment. Samuel's body felt like lead. The whispering trees, the half-buried bones, the figure with his own face, it was too much. A sickness crawled up his spine, a deep and ancient dread that told him he was never supposed to return here. Yet, here he was. And the forest remembered. The doppelganger stood mere feet away, its hollow eyes locked onto his. Its hand, stretched toward him, was wrong, not human, not entirely. The fingers were too long, the skin too pale, as if the forest itself had sculpted it from roots and memory. "You buried me, Samuel." The word sent an ache through his skull, sharp and sudden. A vision flashed through his mind, his small hands, dirt-caked, pressing earth over something still and silent. A child's voice, his brother's voice. "Samuel, please, don't leave me here." Samuel's breath hitched. A wave of nausea curled in his stomach. "No," he whispered, shaking his head violently. "I didn't. I wouldn't." But the memories said otherwise. The whispers of the forest surged, louder, like a rising wind. The trees swayed without a breeze, groaning under the weight of long-forgotten truths. The forest does not forget. The debt is still owed. You must finish it. Samuel turned his gaze downward, to the rusted shovel in his hand. His fingers had clenched around it without him realizing, his knuckles white. The forest wanted something from him. The doppelganger tilted its head. "You know what must be done." Samuel's chest tightened. "No," he muttered, taking a step back. I don't. I don't understand." But he did. Somewhere deep in his bones, he knew. The forest had allowed him to forget once, had swallowed his sins and let him walk away. But now he had returned. He had dug it up. The secret was no longer buried, and so the debt had come due. "You must put it back." Samuel shuddered. His grip on the shovel wavered. Put it back. Rebury the past. Pretend none of it had ever happened. The laughter of the trees echoed around him, dry and brittle as snapping twigs. The whispers curled into something like approval. Yes. Yes. He understands now. Samuel squeezed his eyes shut. His mother's voice came back to him. "We have to hide it, Samuel. No one can ever know." But what if she had been wrong? What if the forest had never meant for the secret to be buried? What if it had only been waiting for him to come back and face the truth? His hands trembled. The weight of the shovel burned in his grasp. The doppelganger took another step closer. "Choose, Samuel." A final whisper, softer than the rest. "Bury it, or be buried yourself." Samuel's breath came fast and uneven. His mind raced. His heart pounded. The shadows between the trees deepened. The ground beneath his feet shifted. The forest was waiting. And Samuel had to decide. The forest pulsed around him, a living thing, ancient and patient. The trees loomed like silent judges, their whispers pressing against Samuel's skull. The ground beneath his feet breathed, waiting for his decision. The doppelganger stood motionless, its hollow eyes locked onto him. The pale, root-like fingers twitched in anticipation. "Choose, Samuel." The words slithered through the air, thick with something more than expectation, hunger. The rusted shovel in his hands felt heavier, as though the weight of his past had seeped into the metal, making it nearly unbearable to hold. "Bury it, or be buried yourself." His gaze dropped to the disturbed grave, the wooden box with its grisly contents. The skull sat atop a bundle of decayed fabric, its hollow socket staring upward in silent accusation. A wave of nausea curled in his stomach. The images in his mind grew sharper, more painful. 2 children. A fight. A fall. His mother's trembling hands over his own as they gripped the shovel together. "We have to hide it, Samuel. No one can ever know." But hiding the past had not erased it. The forest had never forgotten. And now it was forcing him to face what he had done. A deep shudder racked his body as he stared at the shovel. His fingers twitched, aching to move. But which choice was the right one? If he reburied the bones, would the whispers fade? Would the trees let him go? Would he be able to return to his life, to the world beyond this cursed woodland? Or would he always hear them, hissing from the edges of his memory, crawling through his thoughts, waiting for the day he remembered again? His throat tightened. Samuel turned to face the doppelganger. "What happens if I don't bury it?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. The thing with his face tilted its head. "Then the forest will take what it is owed." Samuel swallowed hard. "And if I do?" The whispers stirred. The trees sighed. "Then you may leave. But you will never truly be free." The words coiled around his thoughts, cold and suffocating. He would walk away, but the truth would stay here. Buried. Forgotten. Again. A choice, then. Erase the past and live in ignorance. Or face it and let the forest take what it must. His breath came fast, uneven. The weight of years pressed on his chest, threatening to crush him. Then he knew. With sudden clarity, he understood. This had happened before. Not just with him. The carvings on the trees, hundreds of names, etched into bark like gravestones, each one had been here. Each one had stood where he now stood, shovel in hand, faced with the same impossible decision. And how many had chosen to bury their sins? How many had walked away, only for the forest to call them back again? Samuel's fingers curled tightly around the shovel. No more. His voice was stronger now. He turned back to the grave, not to bury it, but to unearth what had been hidden for so long. The forest shuddered. The whispers turned into hissing. The trees groaned in protest. Samuel lifted the shovel and drove it into the earth. He would not be like the others. He would not forget. The truth would no longer stay buried. And the forest, for the first time in centuries, would remember all of it. Samuel dug. The forest screamed. The moment the shovel hit the earth, the whispers turned to shrieks, not of rage, but of fear. The trees trembled, their bark splitting as if the very act of unearthing the past was tearing them apart. The wind howled through the canopy, a chorus of voices pleading, "Stop, stop, stop." But Samuel didn't stop. Dirt flew from the grave, scattering like dust from an open wound. He clawed at the earth with his bare hands, pulling away the past piece by piece. The rotting box shuddered. The fabric inside, once still and lifeless, shifted. A noise, soft at first, then growing, a breath. A sigh. Then, movement. Samuel stumbled backward, his chest heaving. The bundle inside the coffin twitched. A hand, small, skeletal, wrapped in tattered cloth, reached out. Samuel's pulse roared in his ears. He wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at him to turn away, to pretend this wasn't happening. But he had come too far. The hand grasped the edge of the coffin. And the thing inside sat up. It wasn't a corpse. Not anymore. The decayed remains of a child, his brother, rose from the grave, its hollow sockets fixed on Samuel. The whispering trees fell silent, as if even they dared not speak in this moment. Samuel trembled. Who are you?" The skeletal figure cocked its head, as if considering the question. Then, in a voice like dry leaves scraping across stone, it spoke. "You know who I am." Samuel's breath hitched. The memories, sharp and undeniable, crashed into him. The laughter of a little boy. A fall. A death. A hurried burial beneath the roots of an ancient tree. A brother. His brother. "You left me here, Samuel," the thing said. Samuel's legs felt weak. I didn't mean to." "But you did." The boy, no, the thing, climbed out of the coffin, standing on unsteady feet. Its skull tilted toward the trees. And so did they. Samuel followed its gaze. The trees were watching. The names carved into their bark, the endless list of forgotten souls, each one had buried a secret here. Each had paid the forest's price. But Samuel had done something none of them had. He had dug it back up. And the forest was afraid. The trees groaned, their roots writhing beneath the earth. The wind howled in desperation. The doppelganger, the hollow-eyed version of himself, took a slow step forward. "Put it back, Samuel," it urged. "You don't understand what you've done." But Samuel did understand. For the first time, he truly understood. The forest had never been a prison. It had been a guardian. It had hidden these secrets, swallowed them whole, ensured that no one ever remembered what had been buried here. And Samuel had broken the cycle. His brother took another step forward. His bones creaked, his voice a whisper on the wind. I remember now, Samuel. And soon, so will they. The earth trembled. The trees twisted, their carved names burning like firebrands in the darkness. One by one, they began to split open. And from within them, things began to crawl. Skeletal hands. Hollow faces. Empty eyes, filled with the weight of centuries of forgotten memories. Samuel staggered back, his heart pounding. The souls of the buried, hundreds of them, were waking up. The forest had kept them hidden, had ensured no one would ever know. But now, they were free. The doppelganger let out a sharp breath, almost relief. It's over. Samuel turned to his brother, to the thing that had once been his family. What happens now? The skeletal boy smiled, a grin full of something ancient and knowing. Now, the forest remembers everything. And then the trees began to scream. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and leave a comment below. I love hearing your thoughts. If you're craving more mysteries, thrillers, and spine-chilling tales, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss out on the next chapter. The darkness is always waiting, and the next story could be just around the corner. See you in the next one, if you dare.